seen, I'm going to start it up here, is that the feminine energy and the masculine energy are divine. They're divine. Okay. Now, if you don't believe that, one thing I just got out this book that Edinger wrote called The Eternal Drama, and it's about the Greek deities. Now, take the feminine energy and look at every one of the X-ray of the archetypes of consciousness in Greek, the Greek pantheon. Then look at all the male deities and see what they represent. Now, that is absolutely beautiful. I mean, and you pile that on to astrological wisdom, the wisdom of the I Ching, the wisdom of Qigong and the Kundalini Yoga, and all of these systems that came up, alchemy as well. I mean, how they have basically plumbed the depths and differentiated and pulled things out and sort of organized it and made it into some type of experiences. And they weren't really they are just like this fairy tale. They are revelations, really. They're revelations that came to someone, Well, anyway, I thought we'd finish with this, with the Handless Maiden in Robert Johnson's very, very close at hand interpretation. And we'll just do 45 minutes and then we'll do discussion. Then next week we'll, really, let's all, it is sometimes, it's be unrecorded, but, Jung said that we need to talk to somebody, even if we talk to our stove, and, just tell your own truth. This is what my wife told someone who's terminally ill, wants to participate in their group, doesn't know how she can do it. It's just anything that you just would tell us, the truth that sprouts up from the earth of itself in you, that is unbelievably healing for everyone, but anyway, we'll get started here. Jordy, I think, yeah, hi, Jordy, just came in. He's been very busy lately. So anyway, let's just finish this up. He just is finishing up a little bit on the, the different types of devil's bargains. One is the alcoholic appears to make a devil's bargain. He trades, and now what he was talking about right before this was that you can see etched on people's faces. You can see etched on people's faces the devil's bargain that they've made. That you can actually visibly see it on someone, and then he brought in this, that the alcoholic appears to make a devil's bargain. He trades his suffering for the oblivion paid by his family, by his wife and daughter and the feminine within him. That the nothingness they feel means a miller's character is nearby. And the daughter of an alcoholic is frequently a handless maiden. She's frightened, she's incompetent, she can't cope with life. The first word she learns to speak is, I can't. It's a direct result of being handless, as our story defines it. And both the miller and the wife agreed to the scapegoating of their daughter. So the main level of the drama of this, what he calls the most eloquent fairy tale about the wounding of the feeling function, or the youthful feminine, the divine within us, that is the youthful feminine aspect. One thing that came up is my wife was talking with someone about hormones, and And they wanted to know if testosterone and estrogen are hormones. And she says, yeah, you know, and we both have them. Both men and women have them. But as we age, and you can see this true, is true. The fact that you had more estrogen or more testosterone when you're young, the levels tend to balance out. And so the man, his voice becomes higher, and he tends to weep more than he did when he was younger. Where the woman's voice deepens, she might grow a little bit of hair on her lips, just a little bit, and she becomes, you know, well, in my mother's case, she just became a absolutely selfless being. You know, never she was very emotional when we were young. She wasn't emotional at all. Yes, she was older. But anyway, the main inner level of the drama is the wounded of the feeling function. To bargain away the youthful feminine is to lose the most precious dimension of our life and the sense of meaning in the world. Now, Marie-Louise von Franz would say this about some of her colleagues when she would read their books. She would just put it down and she'd look at herself and she'd say, where's the anima? There's no feeling function in this book. It's also scholarly. There's no breakthrough of humanness that came through this book. So it's closer to home than one realizes when we discover that we all have the handless maiden within us. We all have wounded feelings. This is the handlessness in ourselves. Wounded feelings, hurts, loneliness, worthlessness are all the signs or symptoms of the handless maiden within us. And no heroic action can restore meaning to someone if their tender, youthful, feminine feeling values are damaged. There's no heroic action that can bring meaning back into life. And then, but we trick ourselves. Okay. And the rest of the thing is about the counterfeit feeling function, silver-handedness, okay. The trickery of what he calls the mechanical response. This Greek word, mechane, is where machine or mechanical comes from. It has a very sober connotation. The root means to trick, and everything concerned with it has a dark character. Now, when we have dreams of mechanical things that are failing in their purpose, they alert the dreamer that he or she are using tricks or devices that are unworthy of their best nature, of the treasure hard to attain, which needs to be found within them. And it's commonplace in the dreams of people who are capable of high consciousness, but aren't living up to it, that mechanical things don't work very well. Airplane journeys are never completed. You don't ever the plane never takes off. The car doesn't take you to where you need to go. It's lost. He had one patient who had young man who had nightly dreams where a large commercial airline takes off, only to crash just past the end of the runway. And he had this dream for most nights of his life for months. And it was because he was a person who was capable of a lot more. And so they interpreted the repeated dream to mean he could not get by with the contrived attitude towards life that he was living. He wasn't living really very human. His efforts at contriving a selfish way of life were just trickery the mechanical approach, his superior nature, would not allow such a cheap adaptation to life, no matter how sophisticated or ingenious it might be. And when he gave up his ego-centered attitude towards life, the dreams he didn't have the dreams anymore. And Robert Johnson had a dream just like it. He says he had found the road to heavenly Jerusalem. So he jumped in his 1936 Ford, which was the first car he ever owned. And so the first cars tend to be special cars. But when he gets to the top of the long winding road, the gatekeeper tells him, no cars are allowed here. And you have to drive back down and walk up the hill by yourself. And so he says that only then could he be allowed into to what is really the king's palace, or the palace of the self. He's been within you. This I'm thinking of, and it comes up a couple of times of Cat. When you go into that forest, there's the red wall that surrounds the great mansion. So this is that the palace of the self. And how do you get into it is the question. And so such trickery was the worst possible insulation against getting into that place. And he calls it his 1936 Ford mentality, that I'm going to use trickery to get there. Now, he mentions Thoreau at Walden Pond, Gandhi at his spinning wheel, Rousseau with the idea of the primordial man, and the 1960s and the hippies, hippie realm. It was a wonderful, this was just a return of a bohemian lifestyle. It was accompanied by what you called cool jazz with Miles Davis, the beatnik culture, folk music. It was just a wonderful age. Everyone wearing berets and discovering haiku and things like that. My wife's parents were very much into that. And they were all attempts at avoiding this inner trickery, and so they were all saying that the overly complex outer way of life needs reappraisal. Okay, but the inner form of trickery is the most deadly. We can abandon all cars, all computers, all airplanes, as advocates of simplicity advise, but it's the inner trickery that is the real source of the devil's bargain. It's not necessary to give up outer things to avoid the devil, but it is necessary to abandon our nefarious struggle to get something for nothing. All such trickery exacts a heavy penalty. This is the devil's bargain. When the miller engages in devil's trickery, he unwittingly, now remember, if he had actually been told, if you give me your daughter's hands, I will give you a water wheel that will grind your grain for free. He wouldn't have made it. So he unwittingly agreed to pay it, the price, but then finds out what it is later. And Annette told us, don't ever make a bargain with the devil. So when by making this agreement without getting something for nothing, you have amputated the hands of your most tender feeling function. And the price is far too great for any outer advantage. And now he mentions, which is, there's no problem with the material dimension of mechanical devices, but the mechanical view of life is wrong, and it extracts the feeling price. It's and it isn't the excess of things in life that is eroding away one's peace. It's the attitude that's eroding away one's peace. Trickery as an attitude always involves getting something for nothing and refusing to pay the price. And he mentions that the Amish suffer this. The Amish are as simple as they can be, but they have every bit as much anxiety as we do, you know. And then he says in the place of the holy city in Medina, when you go there, you don't see tranquility necessarily. And so it's the outer solution to the inner problem works no better in the inner realms of the sacred place or for the Amish, you know. And then he told that we finished with that story about where the king and the sannyasi are in a class with the guru, and the sannyasi thinks the king should not be given deference because he has so much luxury. And then suddenly they show all his luxury burned to the ground. He doesn't waver in his attention towards the guru the whole time. Where the sannyasi goes and grabs his spare loincloth before it burns up, because he runs out of he lets his attention waver. So it's an inner aspect of what the devil's bargain really consists of. And its price is inner trickery. Now, this comes from the word mechanical. We're going to learn about this in silver-handedness. So I got to keep moving here. Let's move into, I'm just going to keep, jump ahead a little bit. Since the feminine part of a man is usually less well developed than their masculinity, the sensitive part is often ignored and neglected. Now, this comes up with the black Shulamite, you know, in alchemy, in Aurora Consurgens. She says, "Do not judge me because I'm dark and covered with mud." She says, "It's your lack of attention that makes me thus." Okay. Her blackness will go away and become white if we change our attitude and lend our attention to her. So the fact that she is ignored and neglected, that inner part of our nature, is the real crime. Most men, I mean, that Qigong or whatever you can see, most men aren't even aware they have this feminine side, this wordless side, this nature side, which you can find in Qigong and other disciplines, that is the keeper of all that is tender and valuable in their lives. All that is tender and valuable in their lives. This means that the naive, sensitive, unconscious part of him pays the cost for his overly adapted masculine attitude. It needs to be balanced, you know. Now, the usual form of a man's paying the devil's price means being unhappy, tense, or anxious without knowing why. The youthful feminine, in its articulate wordlessness, is in great distress, and he senses this. And this little thing comes from Hillman's book on the Anima. It's just so beautiful. I just was reading it, but this is from Jung, who describes this. He says, talking about men who don't know that they have their feminine side. After the middle of life, permanent loss of the anima means the following: a diminution of vitality, of flexibility, of human kindness, premature rigidity, crustiness, fanatical one-sidedness, obstinacy, pedantry, or else resignation, weariness, sloppiness, irresponsibility, and finally a a childish, and I can't pronounce this word very good. It's ramolissement. I don't know if you guys have heard that word, but it means in medical thing, it means a softening of the brain, a childish softening of the brain with a tendency to alcohol. After middle life, therefore, the connection with the archetypal sphere of experience, of genuine experience of our life force should, if possible, and it's always possible, be reestablished, you know. But that this is the idea which we're going to come up with in silver-handedness. And it's the same for the woman. The woman's drama is her feminine values are betrayed by usually the greatest, as Marion Woodman says, the greatest male tyrant in a woman is her own animus. But it could also be by the father, the lover. It's just the masculine qualities within are betraying her feminine side, making her silver-handed. And the man's drama is that he's dominated by some masculine tyrant within himself that cuts off the feminine side. Now, this is this particular wisdom that is a complement to the Grail legend. Now, the Grail legend is bringing the feminine into an overly spiritual. The Handless Maiden is bringing the feminine into an overly patriarchal world. Now, Marion Woodman says patriarchal world is not the divine masculine energy. She says it's a parody of that. You know, that is not the divine masculine energy, which is of the higher animus and of the self, which is the one that it brings meaning to nature. Nature is our life force, but the higher animus adds a divine meaning to this, the why to live, you know, that Viktor Frankl talks about. Anyone who has a why to live finds a how to live, you know, even if they live in Auschwitz, you know, which he did. But anyway, the idea of the healing. So now we need to get to the healing. She has 2 episodes of healing. One gets her a little bit of the way. The other one brings her hands back. You know, and Jung. This is actually came from Robert Johnson's one-on-one conversations with Jung. Will we make it? You know, everyone was really worried at that time because after World War II, you know, with atomic weapons and there was this great East-West divide. And both sides had them, you know, and there seemed to be no possibility of reconciliation between them. You know, Jung was, and they'd just had 2 world wars. One ended in 1918. The other one started 21 years later. You know, these just cataclysmic events. And so another one, it just seemed inevitable. And Jung was asked, will we make it? And he says, if enough individuals do their inner work, if enough individuals, you know, rescue the feeling function. And we're going to talk about what the feminine thing, energy really is. It's these, they entering the forest, you know, fortunately myths not only diagnose, but they prescribe. And in this case, the handless maiden goes into the forest. And there, this is the unconscious takes care of her. It's like a family that often takes care. The unconscious is the nature's force side, is the only one that can take care of her handlessness. And so her feeling function is initially was quite vulnerable to arguments from her father, that if she just stayed here, he'd take care of her. That he knew that was one of the wounds, including her hands being cut off. And then a most wonderful moment occurs. The native wisdom of the daughter was so deep that no one could deprive her of it. And so she goes alone into the forest. And the feminine wounds are almost always cured by being still, by brooding, incubating. This is in contrast to the heroic method of the masculine, who charges with his lance, in knightly combat towards whatever is evil. Our myths are full of these heroic men mounting white horses, galloping off to do the heroic deed. And that's their way of addressing the wrongs in their life, in the masculine ideal. And it's ingrained in us from the Knights of the Round Table to Star Trek. But the woman's genius is quite the reverse. When a woman is aware of her problems, the healing comes spontaneously from the depths of her nature. She does not need to accomplish a heroic deed. Now, this is not so much the woman. This is the feminine healing, the divine feminine healing in all of us. So let's not talk about it as the woman's way. It's the feminine way. And it's in both men and women. And the women can also be heroic. The masculine heroic task in her is to take sword and lance in hand and charge with all power at the enemy. The bear in Mother comes out in her. And the enemy is so dark and so thoroughly identified with evil, there is never any question about its satanic character. And now the masculine culture seems to be focused on the opposites. And, there is the opposites of good and evil. And of course, in the medieval mind, nothing was so thrilling as to recognize evil, lower their visor and lance and charge at it with all one's energy and power, and to fight for the good against evil is the essence of man's heroic character. It's still all one-sided, though. But the woman's heroic way is based on an entirely different view of reality, and one that is probably more genuine and real than this good against evil one-sidedness. When the feminine is faced with conflict, her nature is to search out the opposing forces that have collided and put an end to the illusory battle between them. Man wants to ensure the triumph of one side over another. The woman wants to diminish the opposition between both sides. He fights, she reconciles. Now we need both those. We need both Mars and the reconciliation. So more accurate. I'm just gonna. Now anybody can unmute themselves, but I just want to make sure. Okay. So the man wants to ensure triumph. So now these are not men and men attitudes. These are masculine, divine feminine, and they're both necessary for us. So the handless maiden listens to her wisdom, goes back to the woods, is quiet, and immediate relief comes to her. Since it is always less lonely to be alone than to be in a false relationship. It's always less lonely to be alone than to be in a false relationship. So she's at home in the feminine world of the forest. Here resides the native power of femininity. Now, by chance, now this is a wonderful thing he says that I'm going to quote from now on. By chance, except there is no chance in the mythological world. Think about that in any of your dreams. By chance, in my dream, this happened. And then by chance, that happened. It wasn't by chance. There's no chance. It's a synchronicity, and it has a meaning. The maiden blunders into a garden, and any woman who exercises her feminine genius of stillness will always find her way to the garden, to the forest, in the dark forest, and in the most feminine of all symbols, and it's the center of her being. But it is also the king's garden, the one that's in our center of our being. So it's not only the center of our being, but it's also the king's garden. Okay. So she has found her way to the self, not just to nature, but what did she find in the center of her being? She found the self, which is the organizing archetype of wholeness. Okay. If you ever want to know what the self is, it really is the rhizome. Okay. You know, you've got the ovum, and you have the sperm, and it becomes fertilized, and it divides, and then it divides again, and then it divides again. Then the pattern starts to come out. You know, to begin with, we all look like tadpoles, you know, and in dogs, what develops first? The nose and the ears, you know, and in us, what develops first? The eyes. So I mean, this is the organizing. Okay, now there's a biological organizing archetype of wholeness, but there's also a psychic organizing whole. Because who invented this system anyway, of DNA and life and everything else? That you could say, well, it was by chance. It just happened. Okay, I don't know how you can define that, but we take a lot for granted, is all I have to say. If you think that happened by chance, it is just something. You know, Jung said the whole history of the universe is that there is something that wants to incarnate in space and time, and the whole history of the universe is this something wanting to incarnate in space and time. And Alan Watts, the Zen Buddhist guy, says it's because the stars want to see themselves. You know, the star wants to see what it looks like. You know, and that was the whole idea of life form. So she has to now. What's interesting, to get to this garden, she has to pass over a bog or a swamp to get there, sort of an island. Which represents the depression, and it represents the difficulty of the solitary journey to get to the center of her own being, to the king's garden. The passage is not assured, and many die of despair along the way, and that we all know that. A woman must keep faith if she wants to get to the center of her own being and find the king's garden. A woman must keep faith and endure, or she will disappear in this solitary swamp. And our handless maiden does endure, and with the aid of an angel from heaven, or from the psyche, from animal helpers, and in every fairy tale, the unconscious, the consciousness of the unconscious, she finds herself in the king's garden. And in the garden, there's a pear tree, and she, of course, eats the pears. They're all labeled and numbered. The wonderful system of the patriarchal world where everything is cataloged and numbered. And it's the masculine mentality that says such an ordered life, one cannot have a kingdom on any other basis, but at what cost? So now the handless maiden eats the pears, and what's behind the symbol of the pears? The apple wounded us in the Garden of Eden. And so is this a redemption of that wound? The pear has long been a symbol of the Virgin Mary. It's a very feminine fruit. Since it was a masculine attitude that cost her her hands in the first place, it's understandable that a very feminine object would bring about the healing of that act. Now, the pear represents, with the lower part that is bigger than the upper part, it represents the bearer of life. And Marion Woodman says that the fact that the hips are bigger in the feminine, it almost is a cradle that holds new life. It almost symbolic cradle, the way it's shaped. And the maiden eats the pear and survives, this feminine, the most feminine fruit. And the king's gardener notices the pears are gone. The monarch sees her. He falls in love with her. And it's often the fate of a woman who is to be the consort of a king. And that's every woman here. Okay. It is the fate of every woman here that she is to be the consort of a king. And it's the fate of every man here that he's to be the consort of a queen. The divine marriage, the Heros Gamos. We begin to, that all the suffering of the handless maiden comes into focus. We begin to see that all her bad fortune has been done with the device that she could not meet the king otherwise. So all the pain and suffering that she goes through her life has a meaning, and the meaning is that she is to be married to a divine consort. She's to be married to a divine aspect in life, in her deepest, innermost being. That's why she has to find the center of her being where there is a king's garden, and then she marries that being. And so it was a wonderful progression of events, a fateful wound given to the handless maiden from an uncomprehending masculine source has eased the way to the same fateful quality in a feminine way, that she, the wounded woman, if she keeps faith in her feminine creative power, to be found only in solitude, she will, as if by miracle, find her way to a feminine healing. And this seems to be very foreign to our modern way of thinking. However, it is the one cure that can redeem the masculine wound in women, or in the feminine, in the feeling function, let's say, because it happens in men as much as it does in women. The new masculine devices have this, no masculine devices have the slightest effects on that kind of wound, and so the silver hands that the king gives her, and she's presented at court with her silver hands, and she's the delight of the court, and how lovely her silver-handed ways are, the talk of the whole kingdom. And so first he unwittingly provided pears that saved her life, and now he provides her with silver hands, makes her respectable, and she's now famous for her silvery grace. But one gift was natural, the other artificial. So, she found the pear, but the silver hands have not yet cured her because they're artificial. And it's a refined trickery, the masculine trickery represented by the magicians who attempt to repair that it works for a time, but it's artificial. And it's not, and Robert Johnson says, it's not an admirable trait in men that they can convince women that silver-handedness, sort of this counterfeit feeling function, is a high virtue, this artificial aspect. So man is often only too ready to keep a woman in the silver-handed state. Why? It's because he wants to keep her in a gilded cage. He's going to give her all these gifts and everything, but he doesn't want her to leave. He doesn't want her to be united with nature and be an independent, powerful life force herself, you know. And so it's the silver-handedness is her whole kingdom pays her compliments and tributes for her silver-handed gracefulness, which makes such a good substitute for the warmth of human flesh and blood femininity. But it's an artificial function is now more prized than the natural one. It's only a substitute and carries no feminine value. Okay. And all our manners and gracefulness are silver-handed. But silver-handed is terribly isolated. To be touched in this way is to be isolated. One unconsciously just automatically replies, you're not genuine. You automatically reply in an unrelated and metallic way to any situation. And silver hands are the death of any feminine aspect of relationship. The metal is never an adequate substitute for the genuine warmth of the human feminine. And he tells this story of from Ray Bradbury of this woman in 2500, wants where they're very good at making robots, and she wants to leave her husband, doesn't want to hurt his feelings. So she has a robot prepared that he'll never be able to guess it's not her. And she wants it to go record his heartbeat so that it'll have the same heartbeat that he does. And it goes to record the heartbeat. And her husband he'd done it to her before. Her husband was a robot, So it's this just this silver-handed mentality taken to the extreme. Now here we want to definitely finish with the weeping aspect. Now, how does she really heal her hands? Because this silver-handedness, she enters the forest, she finds the king, but now somehow she has to grow back living hands. Now, the idea here is that the king and the king's garden are to be in service to the feminine. They are not to rule and dominate the feminine. And so this was her way of finding the king. But that's still is the negative animus if he wants to make her silver-handed. She needs to have living hands. The meaning, since she represents nature, the animus is supposed to not be, is to bring meaning onto the feminine world of nature. It is not to control nature, it is to bring meaning to it. And it's too often that we think too highly of the spiritual realms, and that we want to sacrifice our femininity to that very discriminating force, but it's also very one-sided, where the nature aspect of us is not one-sided at all. So the queen has a baby boy in due time. All the servants take care of it, and but unaccountably she begins to weep and cannot stop her tears. She wants to take care of the baby with her own hands. The king says, "You've got servants to do it," but this time his logic does not prevail. The tears come without stopping. And he mentions a historical parallel. Marie Antoinette was tired of her silver-handedness of living, and she thought that they should bring in a dairy barn into the palace at Versailles, and she and all the ladies in waiting were to go out and milk the cows themselves, to bring the milk in. And they did it, and she went out to milk the cows. And after doing it one time, she thought it was too messy, and she said, "Well, let the servants do it." So she came very close to challenging her sterling existence. And Robert Johnson said, maybe if she'd kept milking the cows herself for the rest of her life, things would have turned out differently for the French monarchy. It's kind of an interesting little comment. So if the feminine is to keep its earth-hand connection, the stratospheric excess of the spiritual masculine realms, it cannot prevail. And in England, the term for grounded, when we're talking about electricity, is earthed. So, and both are eloquent. Now, tears are the wonderful way of reverting from to this a simpler realm of the earth, and in gaining that what the value of what you found there. So now, through tears, we surround ourselves with the salt ocean from which we originally sprang, and are refreshed by that salty world. The queen weeps her salt tears and can't be consoled anymore by silver-handedness, servants, well-wishers, or compliments. Her silver hands will never provide relationship, and she knew this from her deep feminine instinct all along. Now, it's interesting in alchemy, salt, which is one of the most important metals or whatever you want, is associated with the feminine. And it's also associated with wisdom. And wisdom is associated with bitter salt. And why is it salty tears and bitterness? That you only achieve wisdom through a great loss. Knowledge doesn't have that aspect of the bitter saltiness that you find in life wisdom, you know. So anyway, she had saved herself from a destructive father, and now she saves herself from the more subtle, but no less dangerous, destructive qualities of the king who wants to provide her with silver hands. And it's not easy at first glance to see that the danger from the king is no less than the danger from the father. That we'll just get to the chase here because we're almost out of time. Again, she instinctively understood that aloneness is better than false relationship, takes refuge in the greatest of all feminine healers, the solitude within her own nature. She lives with the baby in the woods and exists simply. Nothing happens, but this kind of nothingness is an accumulation of healing energy. The king is frantic at losing her, but his love is too one-sided, and it's a prison for her. And so the queen restores herself in a restorative salt bath of tears and gathers a reserve of energy in the forest. Now this, you can say this, you know, you're always so busy that you never take time to do qigong, say, you know, and which builds up a bank of energy. He says we mortgage all our psychic energy into the next 3 decades. We have nothing in the bank because we don't take time. You know, Jung says, you know, he says every time I tell someone that they should take an hour out of every day to for their soul, you know, to unite with their soul. He says they look at me as if I'm crazy. You know? I mean, and it's so. I mean, I grieve when I don't have that time with the, you know, whatever you in practice you guys do. So then the miracle occurs. The baby falls in the stream and will drown if not rescued immediately. This is a different version than we heard. The queen cries for servants to help, and no servants are there. So she plunges her silver hands into the stream to rescue the child, any way. And when she draws the child from the water, her silver hands are restored to flesh and blood. Plunging hands into healing water is similar to bathing them with tears, but now is accompanied with a passage of time. The long, painful process of solitude accompanied the eruption of love and devotion that healed her hands. The long, painful process of solitude accompanied the eruption of love and devotion, and the healing water that healed her hands. So the healing was a miracle of her interior evolution through following the feminine way. And he kind of finishes, I just give this one little finish here, that just talking about the person who the only way that she could discover her true humanity was through her being in the forest and having this just eruption of love and devotion. And such a person, man or woman, has now a genuine feeling structure of humanity within them that will never go away. And it inspires a similar response from everyone they meet. One knows immediately if a response from the other is just polite courtesy or heartfelt, and a gift from the depths of the warmth of humanity of that person. Such people are healers and leave a golden glow in their wake, even in the most ordinary of circumstances. I have experienced this from people. The healed person is automatically a healer through having been through their own dark times and yet found the conscious solution to it. They now can give that gift of healing to the world. Well, anyway, that's that's Robert Johnson's Handless Maiden. I'm going to turn it over to you, Gary, and just let's hear what everyone has to, anybody.
Yeah, wow. I mean, there's so much there, you just see it in real life, and that whole idea that, that silver-handedness cannot provide true relationships. And yet, what's interesting is in the story, she's admired for her grace and her ways. And yet, to me, it almost feels like, the same problem as like, the Jungian studies, and, like when it's all of the intellect, and it never comes to earth. It's, because somewhere along the line, it has to be grounded, it has to be felt. And yet, we know how, learned ways can be admired. So yeah, wow. Just
where's the anima? She asked she actually asked that of C.A. Meyer, who took over for Jung. And there was no humanness. She thought what he did.
Well, I'm just going to go across the screen. So Monica, you get to go first.
Oh, me? Okay. No, I'm gonna stay with what you said about the person that the healed person is a healer, and I like when they say like the depth of what she went through that she can offer to the humanity. It got me there.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I really like that observation too, that that the healed person is automatically the healer. And I think it's just that they're centered. And so, we're kind of, if you're at peace with yourself, then just being around that helps. Elaine, would you like to go next?
Yes. I really identified with the handless maiden, being a daughter of a very alpha alcoholic father who was all that. And, you know, it was a trade-off I read there about being familyless. You can be familyless, or you can accept the miller's and his wife's bargain with the devil. You have to choose as the maiden. So I really identify with going into the woods for healing. That's a big thing with me, nature. But I wanted to share this one thing that I went back to all my sand play therapy papers and resources, because that's what I was. And Jung, I found this quote by Jung, and it goes, I wanted to share with you guys. It goes, often the hands know how to solve a riddle with which the intellect has wrestled in vain.
Nice.
Isn't that beautiful? I mean, and he means it. Okay. And you know, have you ever tried writing with your hand when you're doing active imagination or writing anything?
Left hand.
It speaks, yeah, it
Mm.
speaks a different language.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Annette?
Thank you, guys.
Hi, yes, it's a beautiful, beautiful myth and beautiful story, and it goes deeper and deeper. And I had this morning a dream about it, but it goes too far to share that now. But yeah, I also feel that you can sense it in somebody else if they have gone through something like that. You can feel that, and you can feel if you can share from that place, you know, and likewise they can feel that in me, I'm sure, you know, if I have gone through that. So yeah, that's what I feel about it.
I think what you really are experiencing is their brokenness. You know, Jung used to say that no one can be fully human unless they've touched bottom. You know, they have lost everything. And at that point, it's really is like the Kali meditation. You know, it's this idea of that once you have lost everything and you come back into the world after that, you look at it differently, you know, much different. It was that one time that plane landed on, what was it, the Potomac River or something? That all those people had that feeling, that glow that they took with them. I mean, they just, it was just like they were had woken up from a dream, you know.
Yeah. You know, and I think it's also interesting that they say, you know, for alcoholics, they can't be cured until they've hit bottom, because until then, you know, it's like it's that they can't tell, you know, what's important, what it is that you have to value. Tim, you like to comment?
Well, I always, my sensibilities are oriented toward the collective a lot. So the comment you just made makes me think about the nation. You know, do we have to hit bottom before we can recover? I also was really moved by the description of the word mechanical. I've had a lot of disagreement with Western cultures, the patriarchy's use of mechanical means to solve problems. And even in our humanness, we become mechanical. And so it gives me a better understanding of what it is to trick our own nature in some way. And I love the idea of the feminine principle being going into a meditative state, looking into the internal. And of course, we need the hero to to race out and do battle with the dragon, but we also need to sink down into ourselves, into our true nature, and find the meaning that balances out that aggressive principle.
That's kind of interesting, Tim. You know, Von Franz says that depressions are good for not just people, but for nations, because it forces them to look inward for the first time, maybe for the first time. And the idea is like for the Great Depression, you know, or any great thing. If they have to, you know, creative destruction, I don't know what you call it, but anyway, the idea is that you get too much hubris, you know.
Creative destruction, my favorite conception of that is the Iberian concept of the duende, which is something that Western culture doesn't really understand very well, but it appears in some cultures like the Mexican culture. And in my life as an artist, it appears as a kind of destructive force that wipes out an area clean so that new creation can happen. And it really is part of the creative process to have this clearing out of everything, which is very immoral. It seems like, you know, everything of value gets cleared off so that there's a space created for the building of the cathedral.
Now you got Jordy's just burst in here.
Yeah, go ahead, Jordy. Oh, don't forget to mute.
A couple of precisions. It's not a matter of entering a debate on duende, but before you mention about the repetitive thing, here there is a sociological, if you wish, or historical precision, which to me is relevant. All that began basically in the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century. And remember the confrontation of artisans versus industrial works, the Luddites, etc., which had a point, as a matter of fact. I mean, the relation of, say, hand working and timing the process of the artisans was lost at some point. And I'll leave it you here. By the way, there are plenty of derivations on that concerning art. There is a famous essay from Walter Benjamin called "The Role of Art in the Times of Mechanical Reproduction." I think it's from the early 30s or something like that. So I wouldn't go much far on masculine, feminine here. Of course, manufacturing affected family structures and the role of males in families, but affected everybody.
Who was that guy that you were mentioning in that book that wrote, what was it, the Canon or something?
Harold Bloom.
Yeah, Harold Bloom, yes.
I'll write you with the details if you wish.
Yeah.
Now, concerning duende, which is used in Peninsular Spain as well, somewhat in a similar, sometimes not so similar as Mexico and elsewhere. In a way, duende means fairy. Is the little fascinating creatures of the wilderness. And in Spain is used for flamenco dancers or even bullfighters to have duende or not to have duende, is to be inspired and some state of grace somehow. He has lost the duende in the middle of the performance, for instance. Or to have duende is to be gifted for this particular art at this particular moment in Spain. Elsewhere may have, say, extra meanings. Now, I wanted to make another point, which has kept me reverberating for all your great presentation. It was your beginning or the end of the meditation of the former hour is on the holiness or sacredness of gender energy, particularly masculine energy. Now, The first point will be all energies are holy somehow. Now, how someone identifies some experience as a connection with energy, first point. Second one, how one identifies this energy as masculine energy. I would say it's rather difficult if there is not a mirror, being other males, being some sort of community, or being a female there. And I leave it here because I don't have much more elaboration. But I keep, because it connects me deeply, because it's something that I took rather seriously about 20 years ago. Now,
go ahead. Go ahead.
To some extent, I see the point of von Franz on depression. I'll take it and I'll declare frontal war to von Franz. I am not in favor of depression at the personal level, at a community level, or at a country level. I mean, if he's a butad, let's be it. Now, in psychiatry, there is something called the secondary benefit that you may be familiar with, which is when someone is sick, people take care of them. And that's used for, traditional use for some mental patients as a way of giving up and having somebody else is taking care of themselves. That's an old story. And there is, say, volumes and volumes of books on that matter. But that's not the point. Depression is a serious matter, full stop. And people die of that. And there is an issue of blaming the victim on top of that or below that. So, as we say it in Spain, even the sun has spots, which is testier in Spanish, hasta el sol tiene manchas. So, von Franz, be a bit more humble. I know there are peripheric points, but the energy one, I think has a substantial dimension. The perception of the energies, how you dance with your own energies, to which extent you can be kidnapped by them or kidnapped by the fascination with them, to which extent that can contaminate your identity. It's an onion with plenty of layers, I think. And to some point, you are not alone here. I mean, you need the presence of others somehow, or the shadow of others, or some sort of presence in your psyche. As for management, your suggestions you send in today's email, all of them are good for me, Craig.
Yeah, I thought
being human or being alchemy or being whatever, all of them, they are different paths, of course, but
they're all exciting, is what I
Yeah.
think. But you know, what do I know? I just think they're thrilling works. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting to comment on energy, Jordy, and I'm not sure I fully, understood it, but to me, like some of the possessive types of energies you see like like where a complex has you, or like where the nation has a complex where, like really bad ideas can possess them and, and they just go with it. Well, that's like, a very masculine type of energy, warrior type of energy. Whereas, the more of a brooding or experiential, like what an artist might use, feels like that would be more of the feminine side. And I could be wrong, and that's what you're referring to, but I think that's how I would tend to think of it.
If they're conscious of it, the idea is if you're possessed by Wotan, and you're not conscious of it, it's unbelievably destructive.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for that comment. Dalia?
Yes, I think I can relate to, I think there was a phrase like, in one of the articles about relatedness, and it's also that it is also a devil's agreement to ask for relatedness before giving it first. And I know it's a devil's circle. It looks like a devil's circle for me, because if you are silver, you have silver hands, and I understand the idea that you have to grow it first for yourself, but I think there's also another fairy tale where the king, everything he touches becomes gold, and he cannot eat, he cannot drink, he cannot, like, everything becomes, I'm sorry, everything becomes, yeah, also unrelated. So I know for me, it looks very difficult place to be in, to and not to ask, and to go inside and to be in solitude. And I don't know, I just had a question which popped as well. When do you know when the solitude is over? How do you know when you, I don't know, that's the side I had idea today.
When is the solitude over? I mean, I think when the miracle occurs, I mean, the idea is, you know, it's compared with incubating, and, you know, when the egg hatches, you know, there's a new life forms, you know, but the idea of just waiting for something to occur is very foreign. But you know, it's often the best decision. You know, should you you know, make this decision, or should you wait long enough till the decision makes itself? Now, that's the feminine way, and it's often is the best way. Sometimes you have to be very decisive because there's too much dithering, you know, and you have to say, this is it, and then let the chips fall where they may. I mean, I don't know. I mean, but the idea is that sometimes we need that the decision to make itself, and other times we need to make the decision. I don't know. You know, I'm just brainstorming here, but go ahead.
You know, I wanted to say too that, you know, on these things, you know, always feel free to jump in. Like when you've got like a burning comment, like I see Jordy has now. So yeah, go ahead, Jordy.
Concerning masculine and feminine, I am reviewing plenty of things in the late times, in the last year, because the evidence is not consistent. If you, for instance, in Europe, about 50% of practicing physicians are female or more. In Spain, Italy, and the Nordic countries, perhaps more. And a significant amount of military commanders are female. And the behavior on the surgeries or in the battlefield is quite close to the masculine. The way of thinking, attitudes, and sense of humor, and the black, bloody, blasphemous sense of humor of surgeons is genderless on my experience. So not that much for the feminine feeling function or something like that. I am not that familiar with the corporate world, but I am told that the quality of being a bastard, it's quite even among genders. Now, that is interesting if you're interested in the military, perhaps not in this group, but there were some battalions commanding females in Iraq, etc., but in the Balkans. And there is an anecdote of a Danish tank commander who was drawn out of ammunition in half an hour because he was totally confrontational, frontal, and blasted the Serbians or whatever with the tanks the Danish had. And the British were observers, they said, well, this woman is sort of crazy. I mean, may pat on a pussy, so to speak. So it comes in all sorts of flavors. What I am trying to say is that there are traditional roles for sociological reasons. And that's my point, basically, that how you work and how you relate affects you. It has a dimension of initiatory. So men traditionally have been warriors, and they have been somehow abducted or whatever by the warrior spirit. But when a female becomes a warrior, not much difference when it goes to the field.
Let's make sure we leave a lot of time for Zine, Kat, and
Yeah,
And
it looks
Catherine.
like a Zin is burning. a
not to cut you
fire.
off, Jordy, but
no,
Zine
I
and
mean-
Kat have a lot, always have good comments, and Catherine, I'm sure does.
What I'm trying to say, I don't want to be a distraction here,
Yeah.
but it's a caution on overusing traditional masculine archetypes for today's reality, which is something that we might have to review. That's my point.
Zin, go ahead.
So I don't want to go into the whole theory of anima and animus, but in Jungian animus theory, we have female and male forms, which are man and woman. And then we have the inner man and woman, which is animus and anima. So it's quite different. There's a huge difference between gender roles, and principles. So in Jungian theory, the principles of male and female, they are contributed to different functions, and they're quite different. There's a very, they're basically two different planets. And so what we say in this theory is that all we contribute to this principle, like female principle, it is manifested in female form, but the source is the anima, or the source is the animus. So to be really short, if you say that logic is contributed to animus, you see more logic in men. But when women start living animus, their logic is just beyond any man. So if you're talking about brutality or whatever you can contribute to negative animus, it can be manifested in female form much more intense than a man. If they go there to the animus level, like whatever, I don't want to go there. But anyways, there's a whole theory there. We cannot just say, like these days people say, there's no difference between genders, it's how we've been raised. No, at least in Jungian point of view, there's a very distinctive difference between these two principles, male and female. And the second thing that I want to say is that this week I was thinking about this story, Handless Maiden. And as you know, Robert Johnson says that Kingfisher and Handless Maiden are two stories on the same theme of the feeling wound. But that's a male aspect, and this one, Handless Maiden, is a female aspect of being wounded in feeling function. So this week, as I was thinking, I think Kingfisher, the protagonist is male, and it's basically a story for a male audience or animus in women. And Handless Maiden is for a woman, or for,
you mean the Fisher King, right?
yeah, Fisher King, the Parsifal, or Holy Grail. So the other, this one is for a woman. The wisdom is for a woman or for the animal in a man. And I think the whole story is about connection with Kingfisher. It's about connection with the two ego functions of feeling and intuition, which are considered female. And I think in Handless Maiden, it's about connecting to male ego functions, which are thinking and sensation. So the more I think about this story, I know that Robert Johnson says it's about a wounded feeling issue, but I think it's about sensation. Hands are about sensation, are about touching, receiving, going to nature, being in the forest. I think the disconnection, the inner schizophrenia that this girl is experiencing is the wound or disconnection between the sensation, which is very much it's our relation to nature. So I think this story, I understand that Johnson says it's about feeling, with the exception of weeping, when she weeps over the baby. Everything is about touching to nature, connecting. So it's all about sensation. And if I'm trying to connect to nature, and this whole story is, for me, is about sensation and body, not feeling.
Yes, but Azine, can I say something? You can also drown in your feelings, or your feelings can be paralyzed. Like it's almost as if it's an anime story for a woman's initiation, in a sense that it makes the woman who is kind of stuck, more or less, it makes it into action. And I agree with you, there is thinking there and there is a sensation there. I'm just thinking out loud now. I'm thinking that to heal her, she needs those more masculine sides of the feminine, but they are still feminine. For the feminine to heal, it needs to go into the woods is more feminine, I suppose. It's to go deeper inside. But to heal it, I agree with you.
I think the myths, basically, the healing to female form comes from the male principle. They're enlevers, they're healers, Anima and Animus. So I think the most women do not have an issue with feelings. They have issue with sensation and thinking. More sensation than thinking. So that's how I see it.
That's brilliant addition. Yeah.
You know, the funny thing is I can see it both ways, because the sensation, it does make sense, but the feeling is where, you know, we kind of figure out our values as well, you know, and so, you know, I can relate to it that way as well. So good.
Well, all functions are related, and every time in this typology of the most active functions, we say that if you're a thinking type and your weakest function is sensation or feeling, whatever, when you start to grow in that function, the lowest function, the weakest function, your whole experience about the strongest function even changes. So it uplifts the function that was already active in you. So I can see that if you are a man and supposedly related to sensation already, if you grow in your feeling attitude, it will also makes your sensation experience better. So they all enhance each other, you know. But that's what in general, I think this story is about sensation, not feeling.
An underrated function, you know. And one thing about, and this we could get from Hillman, is that the feeling function is not very well named, you know, because it's the function of valuation. What do I most value? What do I least value? where the aspect of relatedness is almost a different aspect, and the aspect of femininity is a different aspect, and the aspect of the anima is a different aspect of the feminine feeling realm, and then the aspect of eros, where it's this direct, where, anyway, I don't want to go into it, but that was wonderful, Azine. What we don't talk about this sensate world too much in fairy tales. So that's very helpful. You can probably read it, as you say, differently if you look at it through the lens of other functions.
I think sensation is the challenge of our zeitgeist.
I'm sorry, sensation is what again?
The main challenge of our time.
Oh,
Matter
sure.
becoming conscious,
Because we are separated from our body. The major wound that we're suffering is being separated from the body and instincts. So sensation, I think, is very suppressed.
This is what Renata Daniel, who is the head of the Young Institute in Zurich right now, says that that the self comes out of the sensate body, and we don't realize that. This sort of God within us, it comes from the sensate body. It isn't in some never land.
Oh,
it has to do with the body.
I totally like that, because I'm really a believer in the things that kind of take us into the body, into the earth. Kat, would you like to comment?
Yeah, this has given me a lot of food for thought, especially earlier in the discussion when Craig was talking about, people sort of going off, fighting evil. But then I was thinking, well, how much evil has been created in trying to stamp it out, when you think about it. So we can decide that that group is evil, and then I'm going to do whatever. That's what made me think, just briefly. Then I thought of when you said about the healed person, and it sort of emanates and people are attracted to it. Then I thought of the wounded healer. Well, then again, there's a story in that. For me, the wounded healer actually wounds instead of heals in a lot of cases, when you put it like that. And then I was thinking of her, the handless maiden, ending up in the king's garden, which is great. But I think in a lot of fairy tales, women, it seems, only get respectability through marriage. And then he gives her silver hands, and then she's like the ideal trophy wife, because she's talked about for miles around about her hands and her finery. And then only to find, even with the child, that she's still unhappy. There's still something that is not being fulfilled. So it doesn't matter how much dresses you have or whatever you've got, and the man providing, giving you whatever, you should be happy. And it's not all the time. You can't explain why you're not happy. It's just that whatever those things no longer make you happy. And that is a lonely path. That is a path that when you hit that, you can ignore it, obviously, but for some people it goes that much deeper, but they have to explore it, and they have to explore it alone for them to be truly healed. And I think of those broken pots. Is it like in Japan where they smash them and then they put them back together again with gold or something like that? I just think of that, because once you've hit rock bottom, you've been torn of everything, you are then created with this gold, like this alchemy coming out. That's true healing. And then, so again, when I think of the wounded healer, that's not a story I want to speak about anymore. If you see what I mean, I want to talk about the healed healer that then doesn't come from that place of wounding and indirectly and unintentionally causing harm. You know, even though their intentions are good, you can still cause harm if you're the wounded healer. But if you're the healed healer, you're much more aware of your energy and that of others, I believe. But that's me, that's me done. So thank you.
So I wonder if by the healer that causes harm, it's that they know how to take them to the place that's damaged, but they don't know how to transform it. You know, that might be a part of it. But yeah, good observations. Catherine, do you have something for us? Are you there, Catherine? Maybe we'll skip over to Carlos. I know Don usually doesn't want to comment. Carlos, do you have a comment? Okay, Carlos is passing. Does anybody else want to make one last comment?
Yeah, but any sum up from anybody, Tim or Azine or Jordy or anyone?
I just replied to Kat's what she was saying about wounding, except instead of healing the wounds. I think wounded healer is an archetype. So every archetype can be experienced in lower or higher levels. So in lower experience, it can be wounding others instead of healing.
Yeah, good observation. Great. Okay. Well, another good meeting.
Yeah, well, the next time it's just going to be an unrecorded session where just everyone just shares whatever they want to share about. And you know the one thing I say, it often if it has like a deathbed confessional quality, I hate to say that, but you know it kind of focuses. If you were at your deathbed and you wanted to impart the meaning of your life to someone who absolutely needed to know it, what would that be or something? But you can do anything you want, you know. So that's what next session will be, and then we'll also just talk about what we want to do next time. We will come back to the feminine and fairy tales, but I thought we might want to just take a little bit of a more abstract break for just a you know, maybe 3 or 4 sessions because there's a lot out there. We'll never get to it all. So too many books, not enough time. Well, thanks everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, yeah, we'll
Enjoyed
see you all
it.
next time. Bye-bye. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you.
Thanks, Dahlia, Aline, everybody, Annette.